everyone. I have gotten a few lingering questions regarding the evidence-based practice worksheet. So I'm going to kind of go through this example that I'm hoping will clarify a few points. So the important thing to keep in mind is when you are looking at the evidence-based practice workbook assignment, so it's in Blackboard under the assignment descriptions folder, so find the EBP Workbook assignment. So this is the blank copy that you will be filling in. Essentially, when you're walking through this, everything in red, such as here, is what you need to be completing. So for this demonstration, I'm using the example that I posted. So the question's not going to be on there. So you're going to need to write the stuff under the things in red. Things in red are what you need to be completing. Everything else is there to assist you with the project. So the first thing you have to do is to write an evidence-based practice question. Everyone has done this already. You completed this during the community selection and description paper. So everyone should have an evidence-based practice question that they can just plop right into this box, okay? So the example that I'm going to be using is what is the most effective treatment for opioid addictions among pregnant women? So that will kind of be the example for this demonstration, okay? So let's find our next red question. So our next thing is we have to figure out how we want to conduct our research. So the thing to keep in mind is that the purpose of the evidence-based practice workbook is to help guide you in finding evidence to answer your question. Because again, evidence-based practice is an integration of evidence, practitioner knowledge, and client values. So we have to keep all of these in mind when we're trying to formulate an effective intervention. A large part of that we don't always do as social workers is really understanding what the knowledge base is. What is the research evidence to support the interventions that we're doing? So a lot of this evidence-based practice workbook is really getting you to start searching for research. So we're going to be searching databases, reading the articles that we find, and condensing that information, okay? So the step that we are doing here is completing the keyword and synonyms table. So if you've done any search of a database, you should be familiar with the idea that we have to have a search strategy. What are our key words? So based on our question, based on trying to understand effective treatments for opioid addictions among pregnant women, we need to figure out what our key words are going to be when we're searching databases. So the population that we're working with might be pregnant women specifically, so that's going to be an important word, pregnant women. The intervention, so we might want to use words such as treatment or intervention or effectiveness to really get at what we're looking for. The comparison group might be pregnant women without an opiate addiction, or individuals who have an opiate addiction but aren't pregnant. I wouldn't stress over that part too much. The outcomes that we're looking for is what are we really trying to see? How are we going to know if our treatment is effective? So we might be looking at neonatal abstinence syndrome, so that NAS is an important outcome for looking at individuals who are pregnant. So we're really interested in these birth outcomes, access to prenatal care, and what's happening to the long-term outcomes for the child. So we have to fill out the synonyms table, keywords and synonyms table, to figure out what words we're going to be plugging into databases. So if you've ever searched like Google Scholar, what words do you put into Google Scholar to figure out what intervention you're trying to learn about, to really pull those very specific articles? Okay, so the next step is going to be looking at databases. So databases is where we search for information. These are clearinghouses of research articles. Google Scholar is simply one example. So you are going to need to select 5 databases that are going to help guide you and your research and be applicable to your research question, okay? So there's a variety of databases out there, and certain databases are better for certain disciplines. So a good resource for databases, if you go to the main SLU website, so it's lib.slu.edu, on this main page, if you click databases, it's going to pull up this in the center. So it says, it's going to give you a list of doing research on, and right here, and it gives you a whole list: African American studies, American studies, anthropology, etc. There's a social work option. Let's think about my research question of looking at birth outcomes for pregnant women who have opiate addictions. That is really related to health and medicine. So I'm going to focus on health and medicine. I'm going to click there. I'm going to click go. And then it's going to tell me what the best databases are for health and medicine. I'm not familiar with all of these, but you can read a little bit about them to see what might be most applicable. I can tell you that PubMed, if you are doing anything related to health, PubMed is a database that should definitely be on there. So I would suggest PubMed. The Scopus is going to have a lot. You can kind of scroll through them. So on my list, you can see that PubMed is the first that I have. I also have Google Scholar on there. I have the CINAHL Plus, which will also be helpful. But this research question isn't only about health, it's also about social work. It's also about substance use. So I can also scroll down and I can go to social work and see what the best social work databases are too. And that's where I got some of these other databases that are on my list. So everyone needs to have a list of 5 databases that they're going to search. Grab the names from the SLU website, the SLU library website, or if you have other clearinghouses of data, but figure out what databases do I want to search for me to get articles. Okay, so that's the next step. Then you need to figure out, using your keywords table that we did in step 2, what's your search strategy? What words are you actually going to be plugging in? You don't have to have as complicated as a search strategy as is here, but make sure, at least give me the keywords you're going to be searching. Because let's say I have my keywords, I'm actually going to be searching these databases. So let's go back to PubMed, because PubMed is a really good one for health. So I'm going to go back to PubMed, and I'm actually going to plug in my search strategy. Let's pull this first one. Let's see, I want to figure out, this is a very detailed search strategy. So essentially what the search strategy is saying is that I want everything within brackets, like these are all in one brackets, because those are all words that are synonyms for one another. Because some articles might say pregnant, some might say expecting, some might say prenatal, but we want them to be one of those. So like this is another set of all words that are synonyms. Opiate, heroin, narcotics, these are all words that are synonyms. So we're including words that are synonyms together using the or. So it's linking them as or, saying that if the article has opiate or heroin or narcotic, please pull it. But we want to make sure that it's pulling all of these different words, okay? So we're going to take our search strategy, we're going to plop it into PubMed, and let's see what happens. So I plopped it in, clicked search, and it's going to give me 11 matches. So then we can kind of read these articles. So federal and state policy efforts to address maternal opioid misuse. You can kind of read them. Oh, this third one sounds perfect. Treating women who are pregnant and parenting for opioid use disorder and the concurrent care of their infants and children. Literature review to support national guidance. This is perfect. So this is definitely going to be one of the articles that I pull. Okay, because for the paper, for your final community assessment paper, you're going to need to be pulling 5 to 8 articles. So you're going to need to do that for the workbook as well. So you're going to be finding 5 to 8 articles that are relevant to what you're interested in, that are going to help you answer your question. So you're going to select these articles. You're going to read through the articles. I'm going to pull this one. Okay, I'm going to read through it, and I'm going to keep that back in the back of your head. Okay, so I'm going to search using the database list that I had, using this search strategies. I'm going to find 5 to 8 articles that are going to be important. So I'm going to read those 5 articles for the workbook, read the 5 articles, and then you need to come up with a way to decide how to answer your question. So if my question is, what's the most effective treatment for pregnant women with an opiate addiction? based on the 5 to 8 articles that I read, I'm going to have a better idea of how to address that question. So the part of this decision-making guide / implementation table you'll need to complete, the first part is to describe the evidence that you found. So based on the 5 to 8 articles that you found, summarize that evidence. Because what we have to keep in mind is, again, the different components of evidence-based practice is right in front of us. So we have to understand the evidence. What does the evidence say? What is our professional judgment? So in your opinion, from working with people with opiate addictions or from talking to their families, in your professional opinion, what do you think would work best? Then keep in mind the people who are involved. What are their values that might be contributing to whether this treatment is going to be effective? And then what's going on in the social environment that we need to be thinking about? So social environment, the policy environment, the community level, that's going to be really affecting the effectiveness of this treatment. So these are all sections that you need to be completing. You don't have to necessarily complete it. This student did a very, very thorough job in her workbook, which is awesome. So this can be your guide, but it doesn't have to necessarily be to this extent. Okay, so we complete this table. And then from that table, we're going to summarize our implementation plan. So you're going to summarize how you are going to answer your question, okay? So based on the evidence, based on the social factors, based on personal values and my professional judgment, I think that by collaborating with healthcare providers who are already engaged in treating women who have addictions, we're going to help pregnant women with opiate addictions get access to early treatment and prenatal care to manage their opiate addiction, and then also provide mothers with follow-up care to minimize the severity of the outcomes to the child. Okay, so that's how I'm going to answer my question. What's the most effective treatment for pregnant women with opiate addictions? Providing them with early treatment and follow-up care after the baby's born, essentially. And I came to that conclusion based on the evidence, based on my professional judgment, based on the personal values and the social considerations. So one paragraph that summarizes everything you found. From there, we then have to review the outcomes. So anytime that we are trying to answer a question and we want to answer that question, if we actually want to implement this intervention, think about what all we need to be monitoring to evaluate the outcomes. So when I talked about the short-term, the long-term outcomes previously in class, you need to have a plan in place to actually be able to monitor how your intervention is going. So you're going to need a plan for the agency that's implementing the intervention. What are the client outcomes that we're going to be looking for? And then what specifically will be our evaluation plan? So think about the very specific outcomes we're looking at. How many times the mother meets with a provider for prenatal care, the types of services she receives, the length of time the mother is engaged in treatment, both before and after birth, the number of newborns who are diagnosed with neonatal abstinence syndrome, the amount of time that the babies stay in the NICU, and then thinking about the mother's long-term sobriety. So these are all important factors to keep in mind. These are outcomes that we need to be monitoring as part of our intervention. And then the final step that you're going to be needing to complete is simply a reflection. So this is kind of a reflection of completing it. So what's your answer to the evidence-based practice question? Where did you find the best information? So which database was most effective? What was the challenges you faced? What would have helped you solve the problem? What steps did you go through, etc. And just reviewing that process. So that's the evidence-based practice workbook. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. And the website that you're going to want to be going to search for information, it's lib.slu.edu. Click on databases and then find what type of research you're doing. Social work is probably going to be applicable to everyone. So click social work, click go, and you can find some really good databases. Thanks everyone. I look forward to reading these workbooks.